Elena had always believed marriages didn't shatter in a single day, they cracked slowly, quietly, in the soft places where trust should have lived. For months she felt something shifting in Marco, something she couldn't name. He still kissed her goodbye every morning, still asked about her day, still made her coffee the way she liked. But his eyes no longer stayed on her long enough to feel like home. It began with small changes. He guarded his phone as if it contained state secrets. He spent longer in the bathroom, sometimes with the shower running but the water never touching his skin. He laughed at messages he didn't share. When she asked who he was talking to, he answered too quickly, too casually. A woman learns to read between silences. And Elena had learned well. One evening, the hour hung heavy with unease. Marco stepped into the shower, humming a forced, nervous tune. Elena stayed in bed, scrolling absent-mindedly, trying not to let suspicion poison her thoughts. She wanted to trust him, desperately. But then his phone lit up beside her, buzzing once, twice, then again. The screen displayed a voice note from Marco's best friend Diego. Before Elena could look away, it played automatically. Marco had left it on autoplay from earlier. And suddenly, she heard her husband's voice, raw, unfiltered, confessing words she was never meant to hear. Diego, I know it's wrong, but I can't stop thinking about her. I don't want to cheat. I'd never cross that line. But Lucia, man, I don't know what's happening to me. Lucia, her coworker, her friend. The name sliced through her like glass. She froze, every muscle locking, as if moving would make the pain realer. The voice note continued, each second tightening a rope around her heart. I know Elena would kill me if she knew. But I wish I could be honest about what I feel. About this fantasy. About wanting something different for just a moment. A fantasy. A desire. A secret wish. Elena felt the floor tilt beneath her. Her breathing turned shallow. The betrayal wasn't physical but emotional, intimate. Hidden in the quiet corners where marriage vows were supposed to protect. When she heard the shower turn off, she quickly placed the phone back and lay still, pretending to sleep. Her heartbeat echoed so loudly she feared he might hear it through her ribcage. Marco walked out moments later, humming the same tune. Oblivious to the fact that the world he shared with her had just shifted into something darker. As he slid into bed and wrapped an arm around her waist, Elena kept her eyes closed. The familiar touch felt foreign, almost cold. She didn't pull away. She didn't speak. She didn't cry. Instead, a thought formed with perfect clarity, sharp, calculated, almost terrifying in its calmness. If he wanted her so badly, then she would bring Lucia to him herself. The wish he whispered in secret would soon confront him face to face, and Elena would finally see the truth without shadows. The morning after, hearing Marco's confession, Elena woke with an unsettling clarity. She didn't rage. She didn't cry. She moved with the controlled precision of someone who had been hurt so deeply that emotion could no longer reach the surface. She kissed Marco's cheek, poured his coffee, and asked about his day the same way she always did. If he noticed the faint tremble in her hands, he didn't say anything. Inside, her thoughts were anything but calm. His words repeated over and over like a cruel echo. I can't stop thinking about her. Lucia. Most people would confront their partner, demand answers, or storm out. But Elena wasn't most people. She needed truth, not excuses. She needed to see how deep his desire truly went. So she opened her phone, scrolled through her contacts, and found Lucia's name. Her finger hovered above the screen for a long moment. Lucia had always been kind to her, warm, gentle, unaware of whatever fantasy Marco had woven around her. There was no reason to believe she had encouraged anything. But Elena needed to see them together. In the same room. Under the same roof dot, she took a steady breath and typed a message that would become the spark of a storm. Hola Lucia. Hace mucho que no nos vimos. ¿Quieres venir a cenar esta semana? Te extrago. A simple message, friendly, innocent, but behind every letter there was sharp intention. Lucia replied within minutes, enthusiastic and sweet as always. Claro que sí. Me encantaría. Cuando? Elena's stomach tightened. It was suddenly real. While Marco worked late that evening, Elena planned the night with quiet perfection. She cleaned every surface twice, rearranged the flowers on the dining table, and selected a menu that felt warm and welcoming, yet emotional enough to sting Marco with memory. She cooked his favorite dishes, carefully seasoning them for a dinner she didn't actually want to share with him. The house felt like a stage. Every corner prepared for a performance he didn't fully understand yet. When Marco arrived home, she greeted him with a smile so serene it made his eyes narrow, slightly curious, but not suspicious. How was work? He asked, loosening his tie. Good, she replied casually. Oh, by the way, I invited Lucia for dinner tomorrow. She said yes. For the first time in weeks, Marco's face betrayed something he couldn't hide, pure shock. His throat bobbed as he swallowed hard. Lucia? Why? He asked, trying to sound neutral, but the tremor in his voice gave him away. Elena shrugged lightly. We haven't seen her in a while. I thought it would be nice. Marco didn't answer right away. He nodded too slowly, too carefully. His eyes darted toward the kitchen, toward the floor, anywhere except her face. Elena watched that panic bloom, subtle but unmistakable. She knew then that the dinner wasn't just a test. It was a mirror she was forcing him to stand before, and tomorrow, when Lucia walked through their front door, every secret in Marco's heart would be exposed under the warm glow of their dining room lights. Next evening arrived with a heaviness that settled over the house like fog. Elena had spent the entire day preparing not just the food, or the table, or the setting, but her own emotions. She rehearsed her expressions in the mirror, practicing smiles that didn't reveal the storm raging beneath her ribs. She promised herself she would not crack. Not tonight. Tonight, she was in control. Marco hovered around the house like a restless shadow. He kept checking his phone, glancing toward the window, adjusting his shirt collar, then fixing it again. Every small movement screamed anxiety. He was terrified, and he had every reason to be. At exactly 7. The doorbell rang. Lucia stepped in with her warm smile and soft charm, carrying a small box of pastries and wearing a simple floral dress. She looked harmless, innocent, even. But to Marco, she was the embodiment of a desire he had whispered in secret. To Elena, she was the living reminder of betrayal. Que linda estás. Elena greeted her with open arms, hugging her as if nothing in the world was wrong. Lucia laughed, thanking her, completely unaware of the undertow pulling below the surface. Marco stood stiffly behind Elena, forcing a smile so strained it barely qualified as one. His eyes lingered on Lucia for a fraction longer than they should have. Elena caught it instantly. She filed every detail away like evidence. Dinner began politely enough. Elena poured wine, Lucia chatted about her week, and Marco attempted small talk while trying not to visibly drown in his own discomfort. The tension, however, grew like a silent beast between them. Elena steered the conversation meticulously, each topic chosen like a strategic move on a chessboard. So, Lucia, she began lightly, do you believe that people can be happily married and still get tempted? Lucia blinked, surprised. I think temptation happens, but acting on it is different. Marco nearly choked on his food. Elena smiled sweetly and turned to him. What do you think, Carico? His jaw tightened. I think people should be honest with their partners, he said carefully. eyes never meeting hers. Lucia seemed puzzled by his tension, but she continued talking, oblivious to the emotional minefield she was walking through. Every small reaction, every nervous glance exchanged between Marco and Lucia was a spark in the silence. Marco's hand trembled slightly when he lifted his glass. When their eyes met by accident, Lucia quickly looked away, her cheeks warming with discomfort. Elena saw everything. Not because she wanted to catch him, but because she needed to understand him. Deeply. As dessert was served, the atmosphere grew denser. Elena leaned back slightly, studying both of them with the calm sharpness of someone who had stopped feeling fear and started observing human nature instead. Finally, she placed her glass on the table with deliberate softness. "Lucia," she said, tone light but piercing, "has anyone ever desired you? When they shouldn't have?" The question hung in the air like a blade. Lucia froze. Marco's face drained of color. The game had officially begun. And Elena was no longer just a wife. She was the silent judge of a truth no one wanted to say aloud. The silence after Elena's question stretched so long that even the air seemed afraid to move. Lucia looked stunned, her lips parted slightly, unsure if she had heard correctly. Marco, on the other hand, went rigid, his spine straightening, his fingers clenching around the armrest of his chair until his knuckles whitened. Elena didn't look away from him. She didn't blink. She didn't soften the blow. She simply repeated the question in a tone much too gentle for the storm it carried. "Marco, why don't you tell Lucia what you told Diego last week?" The moment shattered. Marco's head snapped toward her, eyes wide and fearful. He opened his mouth, but no words came out, only a soft, strangled sound. The fragile mask he had worn all evening crumbled completely. Lucia looked between them, confused and growing more anxious with every passing second. "¿Qué está pasando?" Lucia whispered, her voice shaking. Elena leaned back, folding her hands calmly in her lap. She had waited for this moment, rehearsed this confrontation in her mind countless times since hearing the voice note. She wasn't angry anymore. Anger was too small. What she felt was deeper, colder, a controlled ache that demanded truth. "Marco," she said softly, "tell her about your wish." Marco swallowed hard. His eyes filled with panic, with guilt, with the fear that came from realizing he was about to lose everything. He rubbed his palms on his jeans, then buried his face in his hands. "Elena," he whispered, "please don't do this." But she didn't move. She didn't break. She waited. Finally, defeated, Marco exhaled in a shuddering breath. "Lucia," he croaked, unable to look at her. "I said something stupid. To Diego. Something I didn't mean." "What did you say?" Lucia demanded, her voice thin with dread. Marco squeezed his eyes shut. "I told him I had feelings for you. Not real ones, just a fantasy. A moment of weakness. I wasn't going to act on it. I swear to God." Lucia recoiled as if someone had slapped her. "Q?" She shook her head. "Marco, I didn't know. I never encouraged anything." Elena nodded. "I know you didn't." She had expected this. Lucia was shocked, uncomfortable, even disgusted. It confirmed everything Elena had hoped and feared. Marco tried to speak again, reaching toward Lucia. "I'm sorry. It was just a thought, nothing more. I was stupid." Lucia pulled her hand away as if his touch might burn her. "You're married. And Elena is my friend. How could you even think?" Her voice cracked, and she stood abruptly, pacing in small, frantic steps. Her cheeks flushed with embarrassment, her eyes shining with hurt. Elena watched quietly, her heart breaking and hardening at the same time. For months she wondered if she was imagining things. For weeks she doubted her intuition. For days she replayed the confession in her head. Now it was all laid bare in the open. No excuses. No lies left to hide behind. The truth had finally crawled into the light, ugly, trembling, and undeniable, and nothing in that living room would ever be the same again. For several seconds, the room was nothing but chaos made of silence. Not a peaceful silence, but the kind that follows an explosion, when dust still floats in the air and everyone is left blinking at the destruction. Lucia stood trembling, her breathing shallow, as if betrayal, despite not being hers, had carved into her ribs. Marco looked shattered, like a man drowning in his own guilt. And Elena, she felt strangely numb, as though her emotions were something she had packed away earlier in the day, leaving only logic behind. Lucia was the first to break. Esto es repugnant, she spat, her voice trembling. Yo te veo como un amigo, como el esposo de mi compañera. Nunca te di ninguna señal. Marco tried to speak, but she cut him off with a sharp gesture. No, Marco, this isn't just a fantasy. This is disrespect. To me, to Elena, to your marriage. Elena watched her, grateful yet heartbroken. Lucia was angry, not because she felt desired, but because she felt implicated in something she never wanted to be part of. Her fury wasn't vanity. It was self-defense. And Elena realized something important then. Lucia was innocent. Truly innocent. I didn't mean to involve you, Elena said softly, her eyes meeting Lucia's. I needed to see the truth with my own eyes. Lucia swallowed, her anger softening for a moment. Elena, you didn't deserve this. Elena smiled, but it was a fragile smile, thin, brittle, and exhausted. I know. Marco finally found his voice, though it trembled. Elena, please. I never planned to act on anything. It was just a thought, a moment of stupid weakness. Elena turned to him, and for the first time since last night, she allowed the pain to show. You didn't just think it, Marco. You nurtured it. You hid it. You gave it life in your mind. You made secret space for another woman in your fantasies, and then lied to me every day while doing it. Marco shook his head. I'm sorry. I swear I'm sorry. I love you. I've never cheated on you. That's the problem, she whispered. You think cheating only happens in bed. Lucia exhaled shakily, finally backing away. I can't stay here. I'm sorry, Elena. This is too much. She grabbed her purse, still trembling. Before leaving, she turned briefly to Marco with eyes full of disappointment. You need help. And you need to face what you've been doing. When the door closed behind her, the house seemed to collapse into a suffocating quiet. Marco paced, running his hands over his face, his hair, anything he could grip. Elena, please talk to me. Tell me what you're thinking. She didn't answer immediately. She studied him, this man she thought she knew. What else have you hidden? She finally asked. Her voice was too calm, too steady. Marco froze, and then slowly, painfully, more secrets began to unravel. Small things at first, half-truths, thoughts he had buried, messages he deleted, emotional impulses he justified as harmless. Each revelation was another crack in the foundation of their marriage, and Elena listened, not with fury, but with the heartbreaking realization that she was hearing the real Marco for the first time in years. The man he had become was no longer the man she married, and now she had to decide what to do with the truth that no longer fit inside her home. The house felt unbearably still after Lucia's departure. Her absence left behind a silence so thick that Elena could hear the faint ticking of the clock in the hallway, a sound she had never noticed before. Marco stood in the center of the living room like a man surrounded by invisible wreckage. His breathing was shaky, his eyes glossy, his hands trembling. But Elena remained perfectly still on the couch, staring at the shadows on the wall instead of at him. Elena, he whispered. His voice cracked. I'm begging you. Say something." She finally turned toward him. Her face wasn't angry. It wasn't cold. It was heartbreaking in its calmness. A woman who had cried out all her tears long before they ever formed. "Why?" she asked softly. "You weren't honest with me before. Why should I speak now?" Marco sank to his knees in front of her, grabbing her hand as if it were the last real thing he could hold on to in a collapsing world. "Because I love you. Because I messed up. Because I didn't know how to talk to you about what I was feeling. It was stupid, careless, disgusting, I know that. But it wasn't real, Elena. You're the one I want." Elena didn't pull her hand away, but neither did she return the grasp. She simply stared down at him, her voice barely above a whisper. "You wanted someone else. You fantasized about someone right in front of me. And then you lied, every day, while pretending everything was fine." "I never touched her," Marco pleaded. "I never cheated." She nodded slowly, letting out a trembling breath. "But you abandoned me in your heart long before tonight. You gave parts of yourself to a fantasy. That's a form of infidelity too, Marco, one nobody ever talks about." His expression twisted in pain, but she continued before he could speak. "I need to breathe," she whispered. "I need to think. I need to remember who I am when I'm not drowning in your secrets." Marco froze. "Elena, please don't leave. Not tonight. We can fix this. I'll go to therapy. I'll do anything. Just don't walk away." She stood slowly, gently slipping her hand from his. He looked like he was watching his entire world fall apart in slow motion. "I'm not leaving forever," she said calmly, though her voice wavered around the edges. "I'm leaving for me." She walked to the bedroom, pulled out a small suitcase from under the bed, and filled it with just enough clothes for a few days. She took her charger, her favorite book, and the necklace her mother had given her. Nothing else. No evidence of anger. No hint of revenge. Just the quiet dignity of a woman choosing herself. When she returned to the living room, Marco stood silently, tears streaming down his face. He stepped forward, but she shook her head gently. "Don't stop me," she whispered, and he didn't. She stepped outside into the cool night air. The world felt strangely open, heavy, yet filled with something she hadn't felt in a long time. As she closed the door behind her, she whispered to herself, "If he wished for someone else, then maybe it's time I start wishing for myself." And for the first time in months, Elena felt the smallest spark of freedom glowing in her chest. Painful, yes, but honest. A beginning born from an ending.